Welcome to the Sins of Sinister issue number 1, the newest X-Men event in Marvel Comics. And when this comic opens, we undergo a small time skip. A time skip into a dark future. A dark future made of Sinisters. 10 years later, in the nursery of Krakoa, a single person stood waiting for several eggs to hatch. As life rushes into the world, we are met with a shocking revelation. To me, my me. To me, my Sinisters. Skipping back to the current day, we pick up moments after the banishment of Nathaniel Essex, just to discover everything is not to be as it seems. For our Charles bears the mark of Sinister. But see, he isn't the only one, because somehow Sinister was able to corrupt all the telepaths that passed judgment upon him. So with half the council under his control, the sky's the limit for Sinister influence on all of mutantdom, and if he plays his cards right, the world. And what would be the best way to do that? By filling the 3 vacant seats on the council, but not with more mutants, no, but humans. Humans that they can control and manipulate, because if they give humans a small sense of representation as well as the opportunity to undergo the resurrection process, then the doors for long-term security will be wide open for the taking. And take they did. With no time at all, the council was in complete agreement on the plan, and off to the races they went. Fast forward 1 year, and we picked up in New York City with our good friend and journalist, Ben Urich, as he met with JJ, better known as James Jonah Jameson. And if we know one thing about JJ, it's that he loves a good story involving heroes. And just as luck will have it, that's Ben Urich's specialty, and the story he has is something that would shake the foundation of the Marvel Universe. But as an expert journalist, one thing he learned throughout the years is to be certain about who he puts his trust into. And with the Sins of Sinister in full effect, a test would be required. A test that can ensure one's identity, to ensure they are not sinister. Because he speaks of a Trojan horse buried within the mutant's gift to mankind. A Trojan horse within the limited X gene that is supposed to guarantee immortality. But see, this gene also has a dark side within it. It comes with a personality that can be activated at any time and pushes your worst impulses. That turns you into the darkest version of yourself with loyalty to only Sinister. Politicians, heads of state, and influencers all under his control, with no one ever being the wiser. But see, Ben Urich was wiser. Ben Urich was able to crack the case. Ben Urich saw through the deception, but he did overlook one thing, and that was who to trust. For the test he was using was a trap, used to lure out those who knew too much into the open with a false sense of security. So with Ben Urich out the way, we skip back over to Krakoa, where we pick up with the council as well as a few new Sinisters. One of which is one of the smartest mutants alive, who just so happens to be hard at work. For Forge is working on an orbital cannon to commit something I would have never seen coming. A direct attack on the island Krakoa. An attack that would leave the mutant island in a vegetative state. For this, accomplish 2 goals at the same time. See, the island of Krakoa has the complete ability to control everything that happens on the island, to the point where it could make itself uninhabitable to all mutants if it wanted to. And this is something that Sinister could not risk. And the second goal, which is to create a martyr and a railing point. See, by attacking Krakoa, they were also able to frame their longtime enemy, Orcus. Because shortly after the attack, Emma sent out a psychic message, really the news that all mankind's backups were destroyed in an Orcus attack, which infuriated the humans to the point of uniting against a common enemy. And just like that, both the mutants and Avengers waged an all-out assault on the Orcus Forge, completely taking them out. And as for Nimrod Tony Stark, Iron Man was able to affect it with a virus long enough for both Thor, the god of thunder, and Storm to deliver the final blow. And just like that, the mutants' biggest threat was gone. But see, this attack also provided something else, because Cyclops also granted Captain America a gift, which so happened to be an X gene, making him an honorary member of the X-Men as well as a future Sinister. So with everything going according to plan, the next step was to free the one who started this whole thing, Sinister. And how did he start this whole thing? Easy. He started this whole thing from the very start in House and Powers of X, when he turned over his database. For when he turned it over, he added a little special something to all the DNA samples. He added himself. But there was one problem, and that was the power of Hope Summers. Because every time she would help in the resurrection process, her power would fix the meddling he did with the DNA. But after her death, he was able to corrupt her and everyone who followed. But see, if he would have just killed her, it would have been too suspicious, so he needed a way in which it looked like an attack on all. Which leads us to today. And today is where Sinister enacts the next wave of this master plan, which is clearing the playing board of all opposition remaining, starting with the Mad Titan himself, cause in the first year of his 5-year plan he was able to take out Thanos by getting a volunteer Juggernaut and miniaturizing him and placing him in a cannon created by Forge and fired by Hope Summers, who borrowed the power of Domino. And by doing this, Juggernaut was able to fly cleanly through Thanos' head, killing him and instantly leaving his brain matter across 2 billion years of history. And as for Juggernaut, he was left flying through space with no one attempting to retrieve him. And as for the second year, Victor Von Doom grew suspicious of Krakoa, which led him to form an alliance with Namor. But little did he know Namor was already killed by Emma Frost and replaced with a Sinister version. And when his guard was down, he was stabbed in the back and replaced with a clone. But see, this clone continued to spout anti-mutant rhetoric while being under the control of the mutants. And this leads us into the third year, which is a repeat of Judgment Day. For the mutants of Krakoa and Arakko teamed up and went to war with the Eternals again. But this time, per the peace treaty of the first Judgment Day event, gave the mutants 1 hour of Urano's time, which they used to unleash him upon his family, where he defeated them all and then placed them safely into stasis pods and launched them deep into space, where they were never heard from again. And as for Uranos, he was sent back to his prison for all time, covered in the blood of his family as he smiled. Following this, the next logical threat Sinister had to deal with was Reed Richards and the Fantastic Four, and the way he went about doing this was by compromising Ben Grimm the Thing by giving him a mystique gene which allowed him to return to his human form. However, after the gene took effect, he wanted one more thing, and that was for the rest of his team to die as he lived, which Krakoa was happy to provide. Basically, another mission through cosmic rays was arranged, where Ben Grimm choked out his family as they disappeared into the void. Now, this leads us to the final year of his 5-year plan, which was the takedown of the Avengers. Basically, the Avengers team was compromised with the X gene, which led them to become more and more antisocial and malevolent, which climaxed in a war when Captain America took over the US government after murdering the sitting president, which led to the X-Men stepping in to play the heroes as they took out the Earth's mightiest heroes. So once the second wave was completed in Sinister's plan, we skip back over to the once vibrant, but now vegetative Krakoa, where we see the Quiet Council undergoing a meeting. But one thing to point out about this assembly is the new additions to the council: Beast, Magic, and noticeably Namor. For with Namor among their ranks, mutants officially control the oceans of the world, furthering the influence of the all-mutant state. Which ultimately brings us to the purpose of this meeting. Because one person at this meeting has yet to be compromised, and that is the region of Arakko, Storm. And despite all of their advancements, she points out that she is not on board with their current dealings, and most importantly, she wants to know where is her friend Kurt, better known as Nightcrawler. And at that moment, Mr. Sinister walks into the council chamber with an overmutated version of Nightcrawler. And if you want to see what's going on with Kurt, you can read Legion of X. But getting back to the story, we see that Storm is completely shocked by the revelation that Sinister is no longer in the pit. But this revelation came a little too late, because before she realized what was going on, she found herself completely surrounded by some of the most powerful mutants in the world. But before all hell breaks loose, Sinister fills Storm in on what he had accomplished. He tells her the only reason why she isn't a subject of his is because she took herself out of the Resurrection Protocol. So in an attempt to eliminate Storm, he uses Charles and Emma Frost to try to psychically manipulate her. But little did he know this was nearly impossible to accomplish. Because prior to coming to Krakoa, she asks Lactuca to link her mind to his Infinite One. And by doing this, Lactuca safeguarded her from any psychic attack. So with that in place, Storm was able to summon her power over the elements and obliterate the council chambers, taking out several members in the process before retreating to Peru, where she is met by Destiny and Mystique. And at this moment, the three form an alliance to take on the forces of Sinister's Krakoa in a mutant civil war. So with Storm and her new allies on the run, we see Sinister now officially replacing Storm on the council as he moves into his next 5-year plan. And a crazy 5-year plan it was, for the first thing they did was place Sebastian Shaw on the Infernal Parliament alongside Lords of Hell like Mephisto and Dormammu, as well as convert the mutant waiting room, which was created by Wanda, into his own Hell realm. And following that, through Sebastian Shaw's dealings, he was able to make a deal with Muspelheim and borrow Surtur's sword, so Magic could destroy Asgard. And just to avoid people like Wanda from getting in their way, the mutants struck first, taking her out before she knew what was coming. And as for Charles's old school, he converted that into a lab where he created the first generations of true chimera that were hinted about in House and Powers of X, which in my opinion looks freaking boss, and I hope we see more of them following the events and sins of Sinister. And finally, Sinister was able to launch an invasion of Araco that led to the destruction of the whole planet, turning it into an asteroid belt. But as for the fate of Storm, no one is certain of her whereabouts. So after wave upon wave of success, we skip ahead to the current day where we once again see the Quiet Council in a meeting on Krakoa. And the purpose of this meeting was to plan out their next moves, like tracking down the remaining members of Orchis as well as Storm before they become a problem. But with Sinister being who he is, he ended up showing little to no care about the issues facing them as a whole. But rather he was more concerned with how far he could push his research, due to the fact that he could reset the timeline at any time and use whatever he learns in his next life. But to his shock, Emma Frost stood in opposition to his goals and called for a vote instead of blindly following him. And just like that, the rest of the Quiet Council voted in favor of Hope Summers' idea over their master Sinister. So with their dissent in overvoting him, Sinister chooses to confront them and ask if they meddled with his work in creating them, in which they admitted to doing just that. Now to me, this was no surprise because, from the very start, the first thing you learn is to never trust Sinister. And with them all having a part of Sinister encoded in their DNA, it would only make sense that they too could not be trusted. This leads Sinister to come to the realization that the timeline should be reset. So immediately Sinister leaves the chamber and pulls out his teleportation device to take him to his top-secret lab under Moria's old home. But in a strange turn of events, the device failed to do as intended, which caused him to travel them the old-fashioned way. But in another twist of fate, when he arrived, his priceless clones of Moria were gone alongside his entire lab, leaving him stranded in this hellish version of the future. So with that said, this issue comes to an end.